Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was asking if you would please make me a co-host.
I'd made you a co-host,
Yes, please.
I'll see if I can do that. Hold on.
Host can.
Austin just sent me a text. Something on it is on its way to your house. Hopefully someone is home. So for your birthday.
Okay, I just did it.
Hi, this is Sonia's husband, just getting her checked in. She should be here in just a second.
Thank you, Maureen. I don't know if you got my email, but I don't know what happened this time. I was able to get in.
I just switched you from attendee to panelist.
Thank you.
There you go. Karen. And if you want a video, see that down there at the bottom on the second. If you want to put yourself on. We'll just-
Hello, do I do anything?
You're on
Member Hughes.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, we hear you.
Chair Watson, you have a quorum at this point. Carson,
Okay. Yeah, I saw Vice Chair Watson just joined. All right, so we will call this meeting to order. And for those of you who haven't participated in Zoom sessions like this, a lot of us are used to it from previous couple of years, but in general, please keep yourself on mute until you're directly addressed, and then you can raise your hand. If you don't see how to do that, let us know, but it should be pretty clear. It's generally on the bottom in the middle. And then when called on, then click to unmute yourself. But by keeping everyone mute while they're not talking, we minimize background noise, improve the quality of the recording for or the experience for everyone, as well as the recording for the public. So Ms. Willis, will you please take roll?
I sure will. Chairman Green,
Present.
Vice Chair Watson,
Present.
Member Strom. I see Member Strong. Member Hughes,
Here.
Member Chisholm. Absent. Member Emmelhines
Here.
and alternate member Redovid is absent.
Thank
You
you.
have a quorum, Chairman Green.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve our minutes from our August 17th meeting? Member Strom just raised her hand. Is there a second? Member Emmelhans, can you correct me if I'm saying your name wrong?
Emil Heinz.
Emmelhines, thank you.
Heinz,
Member,
like to catch it.
cool. Thank you, member Emmelhines. So we have member Emmelhines as second. Was there any discussion? Did anyone have any corrections, additions? Seeing none, please take a vote on that, Ms. Willis.
If you can all unmute, or you can either raise your hand if you'll put up your video. So all in favor, raise your hand. We have 6. Ms. Redovid has come into the meeting. Okay, sounds like it's unanimous. Thank you.
So you had a hand raised from member Redovid?
I did.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. All right, so now is when we would have the public forum. I don't see anyone listed as an attendee. So we don't have any members of the public present. So we'll, this was the opportunity for public to address our committee. Seeing as no one is present, we'll move on. Our next agenda item is update from Code Manager Lewis.
Hi, good evening.
Hello, Code Manager Lewis.
Good to see you all again. I really wanted to acknowledge your time that you spent with us last time. And thank you for taking the tour of the police department. I think that was very insightful and helpful for you to see how the police department operates and a basic overview of how the Code Enforcement Division operates. So thank you for that. Just a few highlights to go over with you. First off, October is National Code Enforcement Appreciation Month. That has been signed into legislation by the governor and has also been set forward to council for recognition by proclamation. I know that council has supported this in the past, and it is my understanding that will be finalized on October 3rd. In conjunction with that, the city has been working on an educational video for the public. It's about a 4.5 minute educational video that will be in its draft form and will be finalized and released in conjunction with Code Enforcement Appreciation Month. It is an animated educational document that just briefly highlights code enforcement and the things that we do for the community. In conjunction with that, the city of Inglewood has taken to the national stage and has been recognized by our peers on the national level, the City of Inglewood Codes Division. And I'll have more information regarding that at the next meeting. But the City of Inglewood is being highlighted and being recognized for some of the great work that we're doing on a national level. The progress that we've made here in Inglewood in the last 5 years alone, positive changes and collaborations with the community, our increases to the Code Enforcement Division training, our change from being purely reactive to being proactive. We're about 69% proactive in the work that we do within the community versus back to when I started, it was under 39%. We made sure with the assistance of council and being good stewards of our finances, evaluated our statistics and deemed that we needed additional staff in order to come to a proactive level of response. That's what our community needed from us. And so for those changes, we're being recognized on the national, the city of Inglewood is being recognized on a national stage. So I really wanted to thank this committee. They were a big part of making that happen, as well as Councilmember Russell and the rest of council for the ongoing stewardship that they've had in support of code enforcement over the last several years, and moving this to being one of the most premier agencies in the state, and now one of the most recognized premier agencies in the nation. So we're doing some very positive work here in Inglewood. That is all that I have for updates. Oh, one more. We've just looking at my notes. We've continued to operate and conduct abatements within the city. Abatements are conducted as explained after the due process phases have run out. And that's typically 21 to 30 days that we try to work and gain voluntary compliance from citizens, owners, occupants of a residence. If we're unable to gain that cooperation, then the city is left with no choice but taking two actions, either a summons to court or to abate the nuisance. And some of these nuisances were significant with trash, debris, litter, outdoor storage that the city had to step in to abate those cases. So I did want to let you know that the city continues to do that. Those are not funds that come out of the general fund. The city lays out the initial finances. However, that is reimbursed by the county, and the county then takes on the collection portion of that in the form of tax liens. And outside of that, I have something for new business. If the chair believes this is the appropriate time for me to talk about that, I can. If not, we can save that towards the end of this meeting.
I think that's going to lead into a decent amount of discussion. So I'd like to move that towards later, but I did have questions for you about what you just told us on the abatement. When I thought that it is already in code that if abatement was performed after a property owner didn't comply, that they would be charged for it.
So the process, the way that works is, first step, we do the whole due process as required and outlined in municipal code. That gives a resident an opportunity to contest any type of conditions on their property or to work with the city to come into voluntary compliance. Each case is treated individually. The next step is we would abate or issue a summons. If we abate the property, then the city will go ahead and order the contracted service with the city to go out and remove that nuisance. When that is done, the city will attempt to collect those funds plus a service fee as outlined in municipal code. If the city is unable to collect those funds with a reasonable amount of time through the finance department, the city code enforcement handles zero finances. So we don't collect money. The finance department attempts to collect. If that is unable to be resolved between the finance department and the owner occupant, then that is forwarded to the county. The county reimburses the city of Inglewood for those funds and liens the property for the taxes. And that is a tax lien specifically for the direct cost of that service, plus the service fee and any filing fees that the county requires. And so that is collected from the county.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you. Did anyone else have any questions for Code Manager Lewis for anything he's gone over? And I'd like to congratulate you. I know that, we really are appreciative of the way that you run the code enforcement department, and it obviously is showing based on all of these recognitions. And I want to recognize you and thank you for all you do, and the high level of integrity that you carry as you run the department. It really means a lot to us, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
And then why don't you introduce what you're going to tell us about? I don't want the whole discussion to end up on that, since we have to get back to City Attorney Niles on the tree shrub code. And I know that could take a while. And then at least I want to address the bylaws as well. But go ahead and introduce the the topic that, you know, go ahead, as we've
So the-
discussed.
The city has put forward a change to ordinance regarding impounds. This is consistent with state law, what most municipalities are adopting. The ordinance change, this process started well before the current chair is in place. The previous chair did not want to go over this type of ordinance with this body, or the previous body. We've had a significant change, and wanted the city to move forward with these ordinance changes. What the impound ordinance is being put in place for, and what it is it's shifting the responsibility of payment for those cases that are related to cruelty, neglect, or dangerous dog, in which a subject owner has been through the due process phase, meaning the judge has found that there's probable cause to hold this animal, that it cannot go back to the home for a variety of reasons, and that owner will pay financial responsibilities in advance leading up to the trial. We've had cases recently where the city is financially responsible after 15 days of holding that dog at $25 a day. We are currently in the arrears of around $12,000 regarding current cases. This ordinance will not change the outcome of those cases. And the shelter did say that they would work with us to reduce that tax burden, or that burden on our taxpayers. What it does not do is it does not change the current process for impounds for dogs that are found at large, dogs that Good Samaritans bring into the shelter. It does not penalize Good Samaritans or dog owners. It does not keep the due process phase from happening with that type of circumstance. Again, this is only for animals that are impounded, have been through the due process, probable cause has been determined that this animal needs to be kept in the care of Inglewood. It is not in the best interest of the community for the dog to be brought back into the community. And it's not in the best interest of the dog to go back to the home due to potential cruelty and neglect. The bill, the ordinance also does qualify that if at trial, the subject owner is found not guilty, then the city would reimburse the owner of who paid those fines back for anything that they have paid out at the conclusion of their case and found finding of not guilty. So it's basically a financial fiscal responsibility ordinance. All along the Front Range, we're finding that animals are being put and stay in shelters for long periods of time. At the conclusion of cases, when the verdict of guilty is read, these animals are abandoned. And there's no way, because the shelter is not a victim, the court cannot order that the owner pays those fees. And so that's where we're trying to shift that burden from the city's financial responsibilities to the owner or the financial responsible person of that dog.
Vice Chair Watson.
I'm sorry, I forgot one more thing.
Oh, go ahead. Let him finish then.
So this was brought up at council on Monday. And council, your representative and a few other council members wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity, if you wanted to take this up as a body to review, or if you wanted the city to move forward with this and go through the public hearing phases of the ordinance change, or if you guys want to review it at the next meeting. That's what they were asking, is some direction from you all as to what process what you would like to do with this and how you'd like to handle it before it goes back to council for consideration.
And just to add a little bit, so this was brought to my attention and I watched the city council meeting. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to. I have not had a chance to review the ordinance change recommendation. I didn't know about this. This was something that had been discussed outside of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee and never brought in front of us. So it was news to me when I heard about this. And my personal feeling is that since there was concern brought up at City Council that we, and it is normal for our committee to review ordinance changes related to this portion of the code, that it would make sense for us to review these changes, especially since City Council voted 4-1 to find out if we want to have any input. And our input may very well be that it makes perfect sense to move forward with the changes as planned out by Code Enforcement and City Attorney Niles and recommended to City Council. But I think it is our responsibility as the advisory committee to, weigh in. And so I would be in favor of us, taking the time to review it and see if we have any thoughts or feedback. Vice Chair Watson.
Thanks, Chair Green. Co-Manager Lewis, my original question was, I reviewed the document and I had a question about the document. This isn't the time to bring that up now based on what Chair Green just said, right?
Well, I think it's right now, I think the conversation is just a consensus. You can't vote on this particular subject because we didn't properly post it to the public, but we can discuss this under new business and take a consensus just like City Council would.
Okay, so
Vice Chair Watson, go ahead and put out your thoughts. I mean, obviously we don't have the recommended code changes in front of us. It sounds like you have reviewed them. I have not yet, but most of us probably haven't and haven't even heard about this until now. But I think it's worth bringing up points for everyone to have in their heads as we have the opportunity to look at it. So go ahead.
So my question was about the removal of the rabies vaccination requirement. Do we know why that was done?
I suspect it's probably a different part of the code, right?
Yes.
So there's been a lot of updates to code to remove duplication because there's a lot of things that have been mentioned in code in multiple places. Is that accurate, Code Manager Lewis, that it was already covered elsewhere?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just saw the redacted one and wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you. And Member Emil Hines?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for you. First, you've referenced dogs as you've been making your statement. I'm assuming that this is all animals. I think dogs probably represent the majority. Is that correct?
I did misspeak. It is all animals, but very rarely do you run into a concern around a dangerous cat or a dangerous iguana or a parakeet.
Okay.
But yes, that would apply to all animals.
Second question, and as I reviewed this, it seemed like a lot of this was clarification things too. Just wording that was a little bit of ambiguities or just a clarification of the language. In your opinion, what's the major intent of this? What are you trying to make big change to?
The biggest change is to be consistent throughout the state of Colorado, to have similar procedures and processes in place. Again, other municipalities have adopted this format. Colorado has become a hodgepodge quilt of ordinances. The counties themselves actually have this because it's in part of the state statute, but municipalities have changed this and made it so it's less consistent. The biggest portion of this is the fiscal responsibilities. From hearing from other people, they do not want to pay extra to the shelter for criminal cases. And these are criminal cases for animals that are being neglected, treated horribly, cruelly, or an animal that has attacked to a point or has a history of attacking, where the taxpayers are having that burden placed on them rather than the subject owner.
Okay, and final question has to do with liability for the pound fees. You've indicated that there's a deficit right now. Do you feel that the new verbiage is going to improve that? And if so, what kind of enforcements are you going to have to be able to improve people paying their actual fees for this stuff?
So what will happen is the party will go through the due process. They will be informed by the judge of what their financial responsibilities would be. They would be required within a certain amount of time to go and prepay for those fees leading up to their next court hearing. So usually speedy trial is 90 days. Typically, I would say quite a few people waive that 90 days. So a trial could go out 6 months, 12 months. Where we have this dog being confined, increasing fees. And so just like with any municipality, they're requesting that those be paid upfront. And if they do not want to pay those, then they can relinquish the dog and go through another due process phase associated with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Immelhorns. Did anyone else have any questions for Code Manager Lewis? Member Emil Hines, you can lower your hand unless you had something else. So since we're in this discussion, it looks like we've gotten pretty far in this and time seems pretty good. I would suggest that Code Manager Lewis maybe address the questions that were brought up in City Council regarding the concern about the situation with Good Samaritan.
Right. So we did have a subject that did speak, a citizen speak at City Council. Their experience is, again, we treat each situation differently. Their experience was very different than what this ordinance is trying to encapsulate. So the concerns was the city was essentially robbing citizens of their due process and keeping animals, which are property in Inglewood in the state of Colorado, without that due process, and that code enforcement was getting involved because the shelter is asked. Again, each situation is different and there may be some extenuating circumstances such as unable to verify rabies vaccination, concerns for the dog's health if it's not properly groomed or has overgrown nails or has bad teeth, maybe the animal is not getting proper care. And so the shelter does reach out to us for quite a few cases just to make sure that we're reviewing and that we follow the animal to make sure that it is going back and is part of a healthy and safe family. We can rule out a variety of things, such as poor health, old age, under vet care. Those are circumstances, but we do have an obligation to our to those that don't have a voice to make sure that they're healthy and safe. In this particular instance, code enforcement was called to go down to the shelter, and that particular party did not want to wait for a code officer. And so it escalated to a point that really could have been resolved in a more amicable decision or communication. And that was a one-off situation. Again, I just wanted to point out that the concerns that were raised by this citizen is the city is not taking away the due process of any dog that we impound. If we impound a dog, and again, this is a Good Samaritan situation, but we always allow for that due process. If there are other extenuating circumstances regarding a pet, we do take our shelter staff's input. We do require proof of rabies vaccination at reclaim. We do require that somebody is able to prove that this is their dog with either pictures on their phone, medical records, adoption records. So there is a process in place that has to be followed and able to claim a dog. We have had people that have come forward that have been involved in unusual domestic cases where there's 3 or 4 people trying to claim a dog, and the shelter and code enforcement have to make the determination who has the ownership. And if not, we have to go to a court and say, will you please deem who owns this property? So again, we're looking out number one, for the health and safety of our community. Is this animal vaccinated? Is it healthy? Is it safe? Is it going to a healthy home? And second, is this animal being represented fairly if there's other extenuating circumstances other than just being found at large in the community?
Now, if I have a dog and my dog somehow gets out of my yard, figure, like I've talked to you about in the past, I had an escape artist dog and it took a lot of work, multiple efforts to make my yard, proof to keep him in there. I had to bury bricks under the fence and all sorts of stuff. So if a dog obviously if it happens over and over and over, it's reasonable that someone's going to have to deal with code enforcement over it. But if it's first time a dog gets out, a neighbor, instead of what would probably be the nicest would be they just call the phone number on the dog's collar, find me, get it back to me without having to go through the shelter or the city. Say they take it to the shelter, the shelter is able, based on the tags on the dog, to find me and contact me, and they are able to see that it's up to date rabies based on the tag on the collar. Is it quite a few, or is it all times the shelter is going to contact the city?
They will typically contact us, one, when an animal comes in, because citizens not only go to the shelter, it may be this shelter, it may be another shelter. They also contact the City of Inglewood Police Department and get a code officer because they may have information that this dog is being held, is at the shelter. So it's just one, being informed. Two, we need to make a case report because all impounds that come in, and whether it's a Good Samaritan dropping it off or code enforcement, it is an impound, and we are required under ordinance to make sure that we maintain impound logs. And so the best way to do that is to capture that in a code enforcement case. This is the same situation that happens in adjoining jurisdictions. It is also best practices for animal shelters within a jurisdiction, and this is not just Inglewood, this is throughout the state and throughout the nation, that they partner with their animal welfare organization or law enforcement in the area. Many are run out of the shelter. We're unique in Inglewood is that we're not run out of the shelter, we're run out of the police department, but we rely on the shelter versus us. Normally all impounds would come to us, but we've contracted with the shelter to be able to provide those services for the Inglewood citizens. And so again, it goes back to making sure that the healthy and safe situation. I would like to say in a perfect world, Chair, that every animal that goes to the shelter by a Good Samaritan has a collar, has a rabies tag on it, has identifying information, and is chipped. That is not the case.
But when they do, there's still what is it that would cause the shelter to contact the city when there's no indication of neglect, there's up-to-date tags, there's notification information?
Because we are the official record keeping of impounds for the City of Inglewood, it has to be for every impound that is located within the City of Inglewood.
And is that from code, or is that from a contract, or is
No,
that
it's not a contract. So they're basically a third party. But our impound records are maintained here at the police department. So we would be able to run a list of all the impounds that occur within the City of Inglewood.
So an impound is when if my dog got out and a neighbor found it, took it to the shelter, that's an impound prior to the city being involved?
Any animal that is taken to a shelter, when the shelter takes over the responsibility of the care and maintenance of that animal, even temporarily, is an impound.
Okay, so impound does not indicate summons yet. It just means possession taken by a shelter.
Yes.
Okay,
And
then
in some jurisdictions, unlike in Inglewood, their shelter staff and their humane law enforcement is in one building. So they already are doing that record keeping.
okay. So and there is a contractual agreement between the shelter and the city that they notify code enforcement whenever they get an animal that was claimed to have been collected from within the city limits of Inglewood?
That does not have to be in the contract. That is something that's in our code. And so we do require them to follow all relevant codes and make sure that, the animals have rabies. And if not, then there's rabies vaccinations, then that's when we get involved.
Wait, you said it's in the code, so it is in the municipal code that that a shelter upon impounding an animal has to contact our code enforcement?
So in their contract, they're required to do a variety of things, including making sure that they follow municipal code. And so because we have to keep the records of an impound, the shelter is not responsible for that. We are required to be notified.
And is there ever a situation where the hours of the shelter would be such that they're open when a code enforcement officer is not available to come meet the owner of the animal so that they could retrieve the animal?
Yes, and in some circumstances, they will gather the information. If they live in the city, then we may go and pay a visit to the resident.
Okay, so if the shelter receives so they impound an animal, there's no signs of neglect, there's not a dangerous incident report, and they contact Inglewood Code Enforcement and they find the owner, and the owner comes down there and wants to collect their animal and pay the shelter whatever their, fee for however long it's been is, and Inglewood can't dispatch a code enforcement officer right then the person would be able to take their animal without Inglewood Code Enforcement having to show up?
There are circumstances that would occur, yes.
I don't think they can even see me.
One of the other concerns is to make sure that we document each animal that is impounded, because in the city of Inglewood, if an animal is at large more than 3 times, then they have additional penalties added to that animal.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I would consider, obviously neglect and danger are extenuating. Multiple occasions for the same animal being at large is extenuating. I was asking more from the perspective of the concern that was kind of brought up during council about, if it's not any of those things, and the concern about not being able to get a hold of, like, having your dog be stuck there for days because you have to pay a fine or deal with code enforcement, and code enforcement's not available. And I appreciate that you just clarified that if a code enforcement officer is not available, then the shelter would take the information from the person and code enforcement would follow up with that person for the Inglewood required summons and fee afterwards.
Yes, and just to clarify, the particular person that was speaking about their individual case was a unique situation, again, that had potential circumstances where code enforcement needed to get involved. And it escalated to a situation that I think was unfair on the shelter staff, and it was unfair on the city's perspective. Again, we would have happily had this discussion, but that particular person wanted to speak with the code manager, which I wasn't available until Monday, and refused to meet with the code enforcement official on duty to collect the necessary information that needed to happen. So rather than jeopardizing the safety and security of the facility, and the Littleton Police Department was called because of the commotion that was caused and the unsafe behavior. The shelter felt that it was in the best interest and the safety of the staff to relinquish the dog back to the owner, and additional follow-up was needed by code enforcement.
Thank you. I really appreciate you going through all of this with us. I would suggest to our committee that my perspective on all this is everything Code Manager Lewis has presented to us makes it appear clear that this ordinance change is just really around revenue and shifting the financial responsibility to the owner in the situation of neglect or danger where an animal is kept for a long period of time pending court cases. It's been confirmed by Code Manager Lewis and City Attorney Niles in the City Council meeting that there's not an urgency for this to be immediately approved. And so I feel it's our responsibility as the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee, being that this is brought up and it is in our bylaws, to review ordinance changes that we include in our next meeting. The ordinance changes, we all be prepared to discuss. I would expect it'll be a clear cut. Everything seems fine. and we send it through our city council liaison, Russell, to offer city council that was interested in our input, that we recommend moving forward with it. But that gives us all a chance to review it in detail and meet next time and ask any other questions we come up with. So if anyone is objects to that, please speak up right now. Okay, so that's what we'll plan for. And since we're talking with you, Code Manager Lewis, and I know your schedule is you're going to be at a conference, right, during our next normal meeting?
That is correct. Hopefully receiving an award.
Awesome.
On behalf of the city of Inglewood.
So we discussed that we would potentially move our next meeting. So let's just, I'd like to hear from everyone if these dates are available, October 11th or 26th instead of our standard meeting, because I would like to have Code Manager Lewis present. And I've already confirmed with City Council member Russell that she could participate in either of those nights, the 11th or the 26th. Is there anyone who could not do the 11th or the 26th?
I cannot do the 11th, but I can do the 26th.
Thank you, member Hughes. So is there anyone who cannot do the 26th? Okay, so we'll officially make that the date at the end of the meeting, but thank you very much, Code Manager Lewis. Did anyone else have any other questions or discussion on what Code Manager Lewis presented? Ms. Willis?
This is scheduled for first reading on October 3rd. So
Yeah, I know. They're going to have to table it again. It's been made clear that it's not urgent.
okay, just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, I'm aware. Thank you very much, Ms. Willis. Member Emil Hines?
Yeah, I'm not going to be available for either of those. I'm not sure that that's going to make a big difference. I did ask my questions this time, so.
Okay, and then our agenda will include it, and it sounds like you've already read through it anyway. So if you do have any thoughts, then send them please to Ms. Willis and myself, and I'll make sure to include those in our discussion. Thank you, Member Emil Hines. Okay, so we will close our code enforcement update section of the meeting, and we'll move on to update from City Council Liaison Member Russell.
Thank you very much. And I just want to thank all of you for your service. It's exciting to have a new group of people to take a fresh look at things that are going on. You already are aware of everything, probably almost, that was on my council update report. Council did on Monday night vote 4-1. 2 council members were missing to ask Code Enforcement Advisory Committee to look at this because that is really what this committee was established for. The thing is, you all represent the citizens of Inglewood and the public, and it gives openness and transparency to all the decisions that are made in the city, because we don't want to make rules just based on specific cases, but we need to consider really what's in the best interest of the city. And it's always good to have more eyes look on something. And I think that's why council agreed overwhelmingly to send it back to you. I appreciate the time that you take to serve the citizens in Inglewood, and that I just appreciate that. Also, I do want to congratulate the Code Enforcement Department on their national recognition, and to Code Member Lewis or Code Manager Lewis for all that he does for the city. So thank you all for your time. Thank you that you will be considering this.
Thank you, City Council Member Russell. Okay, our next thing is Communications Subcommittee update. Now, currently we don't have a Communications Subcommittee. The people who are involved in that are no longer a part of the committee, and their previous responsibilities were to coordinate with the members of city staff who produce the quarterly community newsletter and the social media updates, and provide our input around topics to include in those, and participation in the actual language. Now, the city staff has done a really good job of mostly taking that over. So this has become something that doesn't take as much time as it used to from any individuals on our committee. But I think that it's still a good idea to have someone involved in that. And it is, as defined in our bylaws right now, I can just, as chair, assign someone that. And I wonder, is anyone who is on the committee interested in taking on this role of performing communication with, and then updates to us about the communications to the citizens through the newsletter and the social media posts and everything else like that? Are any of you interested in heading this responsibility for our committee? Seeing none, I will, between now and our next meeting, I'll reach out to city staff and see if they have any. Vice Chair Watson?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay, cool. Then I'll send you the emails I have from Member Redovid just wrote in that she would assist. So why don't I'll go ahead and assign, I'm going to make a new subcommittee now. It's made up of Vice Chair Watson and Member Redovid. And so I'll get you to the contact info. Oh, do you have something about this, Code Manager Lewis?
Once you're done.
Okay, I'll go ahead and define our subcommittee to include the two of you, and I'll get you the information for the previous communication, and then you can reach out to city staff and find out where things stand with code enforcement, citizen communication, and let us know about it either in our next meeting if you've had a chance to get that done, or at least by the following meeting. Sound good, Vice Chair Watson and Member Redovid?
Sounds good.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you offering to help with that. Go ahead, Code Manager Lewis.
And for the new subcommittee, if you'd like, we can schedule a meeting to kind of go over the processes and how that works from the city, because we've changed the way that we work with that in the Slate Communications as well as the communications team. So please feel free, we can meet for a coffee somewhere in the community or at a park or even here at the police department to just kind of go over what they're looking and how that process looks now.
Thank you very much, Code Manager Lewis. I'm sure they'll take you up on that. That sounds great. Okay, moving on into our unfinished business. So this we definitely want to get through tonight. Hopefully everyone has taken the time to review the documents related to the tree and shrub code updates and all of the comments from City Attorney Niles. And I'd like to we don't need to go through it in detail because everyone's had time to review it, but I'd like to open the floor to any comments, thoughts, input, discussion, recommendations, questions, etc. Does anyone have any of those regarding the changes? I'll go ahead and start. I went through it in detail and really appreciate City Attorney Niles's way of responding through all of the notes and thoughts, and I found nothing I disagreed with. I feel like I had one note. Yeah, it was really just around like one of our previous committee members and I did a deep dive on code around tree and shrub enforcement and structure for a bunch of neighboring cities. And one of the things that was kind of odd in the existing code was the definition of tree with a really weird diameter definition. And I like that that's basically just been removed, and the new definition is so general, and I think it's appropriate. And I also agree with the simplification. There's a whole bunch of things that City Attorney Niles has simplified so that there is a lot less duplication. The definitions I feel are more clear. The organization around the nuisance and code enforcement aspects makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like we should just put together a real simple, unless you guys all have other thoughts or discussion or recommendations, I would suggest that we, and I can draft a simple email that we appreciate all of these changes and we agree with them, and recommend through our city council liaison to City Attorney Niles and the City Council that they move forward with the changes as defined and recommended, unless anyone else has any thoughts. All right, that's pretty simple then. I'll go ahead and put that together and get that out with the assistance of Ms. Willis. And now we'll move into our new business and review and revise our bylaws. Hopefully everyone's taken a chance to review the bylaws in detail, and let's discuss. Does anyone have any thoughts, additions, edits, etc. around the bylaws? Okay, I'll start there too. I don't know that it's worth it, but I happen to be a fan of the Oxford comma, and some of these statements are missing it. And I mean, I would recommend that they be in there. I also noticed in section 4D, I believe that first sentence is intended to be city council, comma, code manager. Is that accurate? Because right now it just says the committee shall act as a conduit of communication between the city council, comma, manager, comma, and the community. And I don't think that's city manager. I assume that means code manager. City council member Russell?
I believe it does mean the city manager, because in a previous, well, in one of these, it talks about, like in B, review the processes, procedures, and administrative functions of the code enforcement unit of the police department. The committee shall make recommendations to the city manager or his or her designee for improvements.
That makes sense. When I wrote my edits, I first wrote city manager, assuming that's what it was, and then thought about it again. And just based on the way we operate, it seemed like it was more appropriate to be code manager. But I think we should specify that, since it's not really clear what the manager is. So I agree with you. It makes sense that it's city manager. Code manager Lewis, do you have any thoughts on that?
To be consistent throughout code, it typically states the manager or the city manager, and then the city manager would make a designee.
Okay, so you agree that it's implying city manager?
Correct.
Okay, I would suggest we just spell that out. Just because it was enough of a confusion to me. I mean, I don't think it's going to make that big a difference. And then another thing that I noticed, all right, so that's one change. Ms. Willis, should we make motions and vote on each change, or can I do it as like a group of all the things that we talk about? Because I don't think there's going to be much.
I would suggest you do it as a group.
Okay, so right now, I'm not gonna worry about the Oxford commas. That's just a preference thing, and I think we all can read it without that need. But so I'm gonna start with one change. We'll have city, we'll add the word city in front of manager in section 4 D in that first sentence. I starred make annual written recommendations to all stakeholders as needed, but no less than annually. I'm not familiar with having previously done that as a committee over the last couple of years. And so, in reviewing this in detail, I'm wondering, first, have we been doing that? Ms. Willis, are you familiar with us doing a written recommendation to all stakeholders annually? City Council Member Russell?
I don't know about the written thing, but I do know the last, and I don't know if it's been the last couple of years, and it maybe only happened once during COVID. And then before that, the committee appeared before City Council and gave a report to City Council on things you'd been doing through the year. So the other part, I'm not sure about the written.
As a City Council member, do you generally get an update from all the committees in the city on an annual basis, whether it's in person or written?
Before the last change in council, really the council wanted to get, and this has been going on since I've been on council. I think when Joe Jefferson was mayor, we did this. And then when Linda Olson was the mayor, we did this. We tried to get as many of the committees to come to council and present as possible. Now, council liaisons, there are some committees that do have reasons that they need to come. It is good to hear from the committees to see what's going on, even though council members, we do have opportunities every month to give a council liaison report for the committees that we sit on. So, but I personally think it's a good idea, but I guess this council, we really haven't talked about that. So
would you think it would be reasonable for us to update our bylaws to take out the but no less than annually and keep it as needed? And that way, if we're invited to do an update to council, we do. And if not, and we don't, because if we found a reason to address council, we're going to.
right.
So I would suggest that we change that to make written recommendations to all stakeholders as needed or requested.
I agree with that, whatever you all choose to do.
Does anyone disagree with that change? Want to discuss? Okay, so then that's our second change, Ms. Willis. So we have city manager, and then at the end of that D, change it to make written or in-person recommendations to all stakeholders as needed or requested.
Okay, hold on. So this is under section 4D as well.
Yes, it's the last sentence in section 40.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. More Oxford commas, I'm not going to worry about. Anybody else have anything yet? Just going through my paper notes. Is there value to us keeping these reserved sections that have nothing in them? Or really a reason to? Ms. Willis?
These are your bylaws. You guys decide what you want or want taken out. I actually have no input on this. This is all yours.
Okay, well, I would suggest we remove the two sections that are reserved and empty and just bump the numbers up. Unless anyone sees any value in keeping that. I mean, it just simplifies it. So like, for instance, what's currently section 4, right of chair to vote, would become section 3, right of chair to vote. I'm just saying we remove the empty reserved section 3 and 8. Member Emmelhans?
Yeah, this is actually regarding the earlier comment about the changes that you wanted to make, Chairman. I'm just wondering whether there's anything specific to advisory committees that would require us to make a written presentation that maybe we need to do before we strike that.
Code Manager Lewis, City Council Member Russell, Ms. Willis, do any of you have any input on or concern about changing that to written or in person as needed or requested instead of an automatic annual?
There is no requirement that you guys give an annual report. It would be up to city council to decide that. So, I mean, you can take it out if you like, or you can leave it in.
Okay, does that satisfy your concern, Member Emmelhans? You're muted.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're removing the two blanks. City Council Member Russell?
I was just gonna say, I agree with that, on that, but I just want to add one other thing for you all to talk about, because I don't know on 5D, where it talks when a committee member is present at a city council meeting and addresses the city council on a matter, the member should take care to represent the viewpoint of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee as a whole, and to avoid expressing his or her personal opinion unless clearly stated as such. And I don't know if that is only in reference to when you appear before city council on behalf of the committee, because it may impact your constitutional right, because just because you're on this committee doesn't take away your right to redress city council on anything that, I mean, but you would make it clear that you're not representing this committee.
Yeah, I mean, when I read that, I felt pretty comfortable with it. I think it makes sense. If I were to go to a city council meeting in whatever the difference between structured or unstructured public comment, I recognize that, you know, the city council members are going to know that I'm on the committees I'm on. And if I'm there just to state my opinion as an individual citizen, I would prefer to make that clear rather than there be any ambiguity around me making a statement as, you know, chair of this committee or member of any other committee I might be on. So I felt like that was worded quite fairly.
Okay.
Did anyone else have any thoughts on that? Ms. Willis, did you want to say something about that?
No, I'm going to agree with you. I think it should be kept in your bylaws just for clarification. And for the fact that you don't want to get up there and say your personal opinion and people say, oh, that person's the chairman of this, that, and the other, and have it misconstrued.
Yeah, and I recently had this experience because I was chair of another committee where I did speak to city council, both as an individual and as the chair of that committee. And each time I clarified, basically, I mean, and at one point I was within a conversation clarifying, this is my opinion, this is what our committee came to a consensus of. And I really had no trouble expressing that. And I felt, you know, comfortable doing so. And I think that's an important thing for us to do. It's a responsible thing to do as a citizen. And we don't want to be representing something that, you know, as being a position of the committee that's not a position of the committee. All right, I had those section removals. I noticed on so Article 4, Section 3, the first sentence, all members of the committee shall be notified either during a scheduled meeting by electronic mail. I think that's intended to be comma or by electronic mail. Do you see that, Ms. Willis?
I don't have that in front of me. What section is it?
Article 4 meetings, Section 3 notice procedures. All members of the committee shall be notified, comma, either during a scheduled meeting by electronic mail, comma, of the time, and I believe it should be a comma after scheduled meeting and then add the word or.
Sure.
Anybody else have any issue or concern on that? Okay. Moving on. Article 5, finance, Section 1, management of funds. It states the committee will provide a finance report to the city council annually, including a statement of all monies or other donations received. As far as I'm aware, other than the private funds that were donated by committee members, namely Member Johnson, when she put together the stuff that we provided the community in our booth. And then I think she did get reimbursement for that because it was like a candy measurement system. It was pretty cool, but I'm not aware of any funds going through this committee since I've been on it. So I feel like requiring that we do a financial report annually in our bylaws is kind of unnecessary. And maybe we could just clarify that, you know, if there were monies moved through us or something like that. Ms. Willis?
I would recommend that be stated as all donations be given to code enforcement, the actual department.
Okay.
Because then they can receive a receipt from code enforcement. No funds should go through this committee at all.
That's what I thought.
Right, and also, you're not given a budget, so you have no funds to spend.
Yeah, so it just seemed unnecessary for us to provide a financial report annually in our bylaws. I'm not sure what do you have a suggestion as to how to, oh, go ahead, Code Manager Lewis.
I was just gonna say there is no financial responsibility or obligation to this committee. And you could, I would not even say that you even need to put donations in there, because if you want to donate to the city, you can donate to the city anytime. Any citizen can do that. Any future expenses, I'm able to purchase, and this was something that was not discussed when you were working on that project. I'm able to process those and expense that through the code department, because you'd be working in conjunction with us rather than have you all lay out any funds or have to be reimbursed.
Oh, like in the example of that candy situation?
Yes.
Okay, that
So
makes sense.
I would suggest you just delete that entire thing.
The whole section?
Anything in regards to financial report or finance, because you guys have absolutely no budget and you don't receive any funds. So yeah, you could if you like.
Okay, how about this? I'll make an updated version that includes wiping that I'll figure out what I think makes sense to wipe and then provide that for our next agenda for us to just do a final vote on with all these changes. And that was all I had. Did anyone else have anything? Okay, so we'll have an updated version of that for everyone to review in our next agenda, and then we'll just do a vote on the bylaws in our next meeting to confirm that. And any other thoughts on bylaws? Okay, moving on. We've already dealt with scheduling our next meeting. It's going to be October 26th. And please, everyone, before that meeting, review the updated bylaws, make sure everything looks good there, and the ordinance change that we discussed with Code Manager Lewis, and let us know if there's any thoughts or concerns there ahead of time, preferably, because if there are thoughts or concerns about that, we could request that City Attorney Niles see if she's available to come to our meeting and answer any questions if we feel like we need to ask any questions. I expect we probably won't need that based on Code Manager Lewis's summary and all of the answers he's already provided. But if anyone does have any questions about that, you know, we could, if we know soon enough, we could submit that to City Attorney Niles in email ahead of the meeting, or potentially request that she meet with us. So if anyone wants that, let me know that. Go ahead, Ms. Willis.
Just need a clarification. The next meeting will also be a Zoom meeting.
That's something that I feel like we should talk about. Personally, I've been running a company for over 20 years remotely, so I'm super comfortable with remote and I find it really efficient. Like right now, I've got Zoom on one screen and I've got, you know, side-by-side documents and notes on my other screen. I recognize not everybody comfortably and normally operates this way. It works well for me, but I also value and enjoy in person. I was thinking maybe we should have like quarterly in person or something like that, just as a suggestion. Does anyone else have any feedback about Zoom versus in person? Code Manager Lewis?
So that's the hybrid model that most of the committees are utilizing. I love your suggestion that you meet quarterly. I think there's value, or even twice a year. I think there's value in meeting and collaborating together, and bonding over our mutual experience. And we can always reserve space here at the police department, or we're in kind of a transition within the city and the way our spaces are being used. But yes, I would welcome that. We can even meet, if it's nice in the summertime, at a park.
Member Emmelhines?
Yeah, I'm all for that. I think that I'm a relational person, and I kind of like to be in the same room with people with whom I'm talking to. And I think that you get a lot more exchange of ideas because people feel freer to speak than to always have to raise their hand on a screen. My vote is that we go toward more in-person meetings and reserve the Zoom meetings for times when it needs to be done that way. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Emmelhines. And then for those of you not watching the chat, Member Redeved prefers remote or hybrid. Does anyone else have any input or discussion on this?
I prefer more in person, but I would opt for hybrid also.
Okay. Thank you, Member Hughes. So that's, you know, that's a few votes for in person. Maybe we member, can you remind me how to say your last name?
Chisholm.
Michael? Chisholm?
Chisholm.
Chisholm. Thank you. Member
Like,
Chisholm,
yeah.
go ahead.
I like the ability to meet in person. I wouldn't want to preclude Zoom meetings, but some hybrid variation I think would be helpful. I think it's great if somebody's out of town or they can't meet in person to be able to join by Zoom. But I do think there's value of personal interaction and personal communication.
Thank you, Member Chisholm. I agree. I think that based on all this input, we should be considering at the very least regular interspersed in person. Ms. Willis, is it always an option for us now to utilize hybrid? Meaning some people in person and some people remote?
Yes, but it would have to be done at Civic Center because there's only 2 rooms in that building that are capable of doing a Zoom or Teams meeting and in person.
Okay, but it is something that's available to us should we want to do that?
Yes.
Well, I would suggest, why don't we start with moving towards in-person quarterly and Zoom and or hybrid for the rest of them. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, thank you, Member Hughes.
I would agree to that also.
Thank you, Member Emma Hines.
I would agree to that.
Thank you, Member Chisholm. Okay, let's, would someone like to make a motion on that? Oh, Ms. Willis?
Okay, so is the next meeting gonna be in person or is it gonna be a Zoom meeting?
I guess we do need to figure that out. We're scheduling it right now.
And then if you're going to have in-person quarterly meetings,
Mhm.
would that be like January, April, July?
Yeah, I would think it'd be maybe the first meeting of each quarter.
Okay,
And then, so if we move towards that, Code Manager Lewis?
I would suggest that if possible, that you allow staff 3 months before we move to the hybrid version. Maybe after the first of the year, it does take some coordination with scheduling. Those rooms are very popular and are scheduled way in advance. So we may not be able to schedule them right away. So I would suggest that perhaps you continue with this version for the next 3 months. We have 3 months left in the year. Normally you take a hiatus in December. Just because of the holidays, and then we can look at maybe starting in January.
That sounds good to me. So we would be continuing on Zoom for the rest of the year, and then plan to meet in person for our January meeting, and then the first meeting of each quarter thereafter in person. Does anyone have any thoughts or feedback on that? Go ahead, Ms. Willis.
those meetings would be set in stone because I would schedule them and that would make it so that you have that room that night. So if in, December 15th, you guys decide you can't meet in January in person, or you want to change your meeting date, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have
That
to meet
makes
in the date.
sense. I understand that. And if it was like a certain situation, like our next meeting where we're switching the date to accommodate Code Manager Lewis being out of town, then we could just make that a Zoom one if it was going to be a in-person one. So I think that's reasonable. Any other thoughts or feedback? Is this something we should vote on, or should we just go with it?
You as
Yeah,
chairperson can set the dates of the meetings because you're the chair. So you
Okay,
don't
well,
have
it
to
sounds like
vote
we
on it,
have,
but you can.
okay, it sounds like we have consensus then. So let's go. The member Redovich just asked a question that she's talking about doing the hybrid where people are in person and Zoom. That's why it's limited to a particular room, because they only have the facility that can accommodate that in a couple places, and those are popular rooms to utilize. That's why it's that. If we're because we want to be able to accommodate everyone, because I know some members are not comfortable being in person still, and so we are in-person ones, at least for now, we'll plan to be hybrid. And so we'll plan to have that be the first meeting of each quarter. Ideally, everyone please show up in person. I mean, there is a lot of value of being around each other and interacting with each other and being able to get to know each other. All city citizen meetings up until the pandemic were all always in person. And I think there's value to that. I mean, I've participated for well over a decade prior to the pandemic and always did enjoy the benefit of meeting with people in person. So for now, we'll plan the rest of the year, Zoom, January, in person with the hybrid option, although I would encourage everyone to come in person. And then we'll do that for the first meeting of each quarter. And otherwise, we'll be on Zoom. And if anyone wants to suggest or request changes to that, feel free to bring it up, in a committee member's choice in a future meeting. Now go ahead, Member Emma Hines.
Yeah, I know that I'm speaking for myself, and I believe Mike, that we're on two committees. And some other people, I'm sure, have other committee issues too. I would ask that perhaps a schedule be determined early so that we can try to make as many of those meetings as possible and not conflict with them.
They are always the third Wednesday of the month, unless we have a situation like we have for next month, where there's a pretty critical piece of information to discuss that we want to be able to have Code Manager Lewis involved in, and he's going to be away at a conference that week. And when a situation like that arises, we communicate with everyone ahead of time to see if we can come up with an alternate date that works for everyone. In my 5 years on this committee, we've done that maybe 3 or 4 times. And one of them was, for instance, to come up with a date where City Attorney Niles was able to attend. It's generally that would be the situation. Otherwise, you can assume it's the third Wednesday of every month. Did you have anything else on that, Ms. Willis?
So if that's the case, then that would be fine. It's just concerns about overlapping meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand.
And I believe that that is on the city's website, their calendar. And if you went to CEAC, it would also say that it's the third Wednesday.
Okay, committee members' choice. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring up or discuss? All right, well, we've gotten through a lot and it's only 7:18. So thank you everyone for your time and participation. And it's nice to have a full committee. And thank you very much for all the answers and information you provided, Code Manager Lewis. And good luck at the conference. And we'll see everyone. Oh, Ms. Willis.
I just have a question for Member Chisholm. What time did you join the meeting? Because I only noticed you as an attendee about 30 minutes ago.
I came in about 10 minutes late, but I didn't show up on the screen until,
Yeah, because you came in as an attendee and not a panelist. So
Right.
you were in here at about 6:10 then, you're saying?
right.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were there either, Member Chisholm, because I haven't. Were there any other things that in all the times I asked for input that you had
Oh, no.
thoughts or input on?
No, I was good.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great month and we'll adjourn the meeting.
Good.
Thank you.